Let's get straight on. We're recording. Go for it.
Alright, brilliant. Hello, I'm Adam Holloway and I'm pitching here for the 6:15 to, well, 6 o'clock 6:15 slot on E4 with my production company, Mexican Hair Productions. We're a company specially designed for the E4 target audience, and with this particular show we're looking sort of between 14, so just a bit higher than usual, to about 36, so even then a bit higher than usual. I don't have a copy of the brief on me, but as you can see there, I've already stated, and this is a surreal psychological drama, which with some thick comedy aspects throughout it, which are provided through the script and through the characters. I'm going to start by talking about the initial concept of the show, which came about in a brief conversation I had with someone, which was talking about meshing and combining twin peaks for a skin generation. That's really bright. I'm going to have to ignore that. I blame the projector. So yeah, that actually says blending twin peaks for the skin generation. And it's a non-linear account of an enigmatic sort of mystery that goes on throughout the series. It's also, down here, which you can just barely see, is based around the thick concept of nightmares and night terrors, which is something that I really strongly associate with as a concept. So just for a second, the one main strong theme of this is not just the idea of the direction of a story, but the misdirection of a story. So as a psychological principle, misdirection has been used for many, many years in human society, in politics and stories and other things, and it applies well to media in a sense of the same way that direction does, that misdirection can be possible. So I'd like to point out this is a toy, and as an authority on the subject here, that I'm leading this presentation, you're quite aware that this is a toy now, so playing with this doesn't really do much for you. And if I lay that there, you're completely comfortable with having it in your presence. However, I'm not going to say anything about this. So this immediately becomes something different, something quite heavy, something that you don't quite like to be pointed at you. And if I were to pull the trigger on this gun, exactly, there's a different reaction entirely there. However, that one is a remodeled flintlock pistol that would fire, whereas this one is a stage prop that doesn't actually do much except be really heavy. So I'm informing you of one thing and not informing you of another thing, you've drawn your own conclusions on exactly how that would turn out, which is something that I aim to do through this show. This brings us on to identifying the target audience, which is something I just briefly discussed. So there I've said 15 to 30-year-olds, but I'm hoping to extend the reach just a bit beyond that, with shows with like Big Bang Theory that were originally targeted to 25, extending up to 40 and beyond. And that fits within your target range as well as pushing beyond it a little bit, which is something that happens a lot on this channel. The series narrative follows a young character. All the characters are in the age range of the audience that we're targeting in order to make them more sort of associable to the audience. And it follows him through his new life in a new area, which is something that a lot of people deal with at that age. But we're not quite sure why he's there. We just know that we're following him. It's set in a smaller different environments such as houses and a college, which is sort of to create a feeling of enclosure within a larger world, which I think is important for a low-budget show, as well as a show that's trying to associate with people, a young generation that feel like their lives are the most important thing in the world, but in fact are quite enclosed. And this is what this is about. It's about a very important story to this person, which to everyone else in the world is absolutely nothing. This is my sort of descriptive mood board of the plot. As you can see, I've stylized it in order to feel more within the mystery aspect of the show. I've got ideas such as fear and mystery and innocence, which are all sort of intertwined together. The legal drug intoxication thing was an inspiration from the Philip K. Dick novel Through a Scanner Darkly, which is focused around the invention of a new drug, which is endorsed by the government, which is a sedative, and so they say it's a sedative or they say it's a mood lifter, and it becomes whatever it is to the person. And to me it sort of identifies quite well with this generation of people trying new things, doing new things, but also getting lost in themselves, and that's very important. There's also a section in the handout I've given you, following the proposal, where it states the censorship rights on drug intoxication in shows aimed at this audience, and I think you'll find that I'll be able to get away with it quite easily. That's the treatment, it's the nature. It's Ofcom's Rule 1.10. Would you like a second to sort of establish yourself with the handout?
Hang on.
Okay. The theme of retroactive continuity is another important one, which is established in shows like Twin Peaks, where one thing that can be stated almost categorically in one episode might either never be touched on again or be reverted back to when it's necessary. The main idea of this show was to me to have my idea about it and not only project my idea, but also mislead and misdirect others into making their own ideas. And therefore this show can mean anything to anyone. And hopefully that will make it a more talked about and more profitable show for everyone involved. Moving on to the character lists, our main character is Dale Caulfield, which is a hyphenated Holden from Catcher in the Rye, which is sort of the iconic teen rebellion, and then a combination of Special Agent Cooper from Twin Peaks, which is I always found as a very important archetype for these kind of characters. A quote from David Lynch there: innocent people are who are interested in the mysteries of life, the person you trust enough to follow into this strange world with. And that's a very important facet in a mystery drama, that you need to believe in this person in order to see you through. And through the series narrative, I hope that I can sort of steer them away from liking this person, who initially is quite popular, but then will sort of drift off into something that we weren't quite expecting. He is the lead protagonist who suffers from severe migraines, which are brought on by the whole narrative, and it sort of adds to the fact that he's being tormented by the mysterious girl who went missing in this school, and this is the main point of it, which is only rarely touched upon, but she's sort of the antagonist in this. But we find out more so that the other characters become antagonists in their own right. He also suffers from night terrors, which are actually visions of things that are relevant to the series, but that isn't exactly revealed until the end of the pilot. Here we have B, the mysterious antagonist who never physically appears, but appears in sort of flash frames and the like. I've sort of based her around another Lynch's characters called Susie the Bunny, who features quite heavily in Rabbits, and features in another one of his short films and sort of appears recurringly throughout. And she's just sort of a mysterious entity that you never quite feel, and that's sort of what I'm going for with B, which is why she doesn't have a full name. Joe, as I've used here, is based loosely on the idea of Frank from what's name I've completely forgotten now. Yeah, it's not just me then.
The Jake Gyllenhaal film.
Yeah, the Jake Gyllenhaal film with the giant rabbit. And he's sort of the human counterpart to Dale. Not actually a rabbit, but I've chosen the theme of rabbits, which is quite strong to me because of the quote at the beginning, which is from that film that I'll never remember. And he's sort of always there. We're never quite sure why he's there, but he is there, and he's sort of there as more of a plot point than an actual character in itself, and I think that's very important. The title sequence is something I'm basing on more modern American title sequences, which fits in with your target range, such as American Horror Story, which sort of fit in nonsensical shots of images and quite mysterious and quite comedic in aspects, and these sort of tie together to create an ambiguous content for the show without actually revealing anything about the show itself. The series will also, each episode will also open with a bookend, which will not be drawn into the series until the very end of it, and this bookend sets place in a theatre where I will go on to explain on the next slide. Not the next slide, I think it's the slide. Completely lost myself after not knowing that film's name. Yeah, next slide. So the first episode's narrative begins with the bookend, which isn't then shown there, and then it moves into a nightmare sequence, which is irrelevant to the show, but it's the typical nightmare sequence of running down an endless corridor. Now the floor plan for this I do have, but it's not on here, and it's in the corridors, so a simple college corridor, and it's the continuous shot of using one space over and over again to create a feeling of repetition and a feeling of pace where you're not quite going anywhere, which is pretty much what happens in the first episode. Then that moves on to the man waking up, and this will introduce our male protagonist, Mr. Caulfield. And then the next important point is after he's come to college, the first person he interacts with is a shy individual named Connor, who at random points throughout the episode will just walk away because he suffers from a severe bout of depression and schizophrenia. So he just decides when he will not be involved in the plot. Act 2 really begins with the sort of competition provided by Mike, who is, again, not very much touched upon, but has a severe dislike for the main protagonist for being involved in things that he feels he has no point. All of these people are aware of what happened in their own way. It might differ from the other people's interpretation, but to themselves they're certain, and only few of them actually have an interest in the lead character. This leads from the first appearance from Joe in the episode and the series, where he will appear behind Adam and they will have a discussion briefly where I'm calling him Adam now, where Dale will get angry and ask him to leave, and at that point he will go. We never see him leave, but he is no longer there. This will lead to a migraine attack for Dale, which will create the first appearance of the character B, which is part 2 of Act 2. And this will sort of prompt him to become quite confused. He'll find a note at the computer which is relevant to him, and this will start to spiral out of control, which will introduce the third character, Abigail, who is sort of always in the background of shots and always writing notes, so she's the only one who's really aware, and these sketches and notes she makes are the things that sort of tie the plot together piece by piece. Moving on to Act 3, the episode sort of culminates in another nightmare which will involve someone breaking into the house. As the character wakes up from the end of this nightmare, he finds that the patio door is in fact smashed open, and there is a note left on the floor that is the other half of the note he found earlier, at which point he'll find Joe in the house, and we're not quite sure why. And the whole reason of this is, throughout the series, we're supposed to sort of get the idea that Joe isn't actually real at all, and he's more of an antagonist to Dale than he is actually a protagonist, but he's also a part of Dale himself. The floor plan for the bookend, which takes place on a stage, and it features 2 characters that aren't in the rest of the plot. As you can see here, I've drawn out the several shots I'll be using, which are on the shot list it's in the back of the folder, I believe. And from here we can see that it's along with the script, I think. And you can see that it's sort of, that you don't quite know what's going on here, but I'm sort of referencing the audience watching this show through the fact that there is a blank audience which will be using canned laughter, canned clapping for the relevant points in the conversation. And as in the script I've written, the man who's holding someone hostage, who just sat on the chair with no ability to move, is, or at least definitely believes himself to be the devil. And this becomes relevant to the plot later on, but we get the feeling that he's being made to watch the episode along with us because the projector starts to run, and then that cuts in with the title sequence which leads to the episode. The episode then ends with a short segment from that where it'll be informed that it'll be happening again another time soon, which is to lead into the next episode. The future episodes I've sort of mentioned briefly in the proposal, but the episode titles run very similar to each other to create a running theme, and each episode will focus more on different sub-characters within the series. So the first episode focuses on Connor, and then the next episode focuses on Abigail, and then the third episode ties both those episodes up together as they're going to be running parallel, but you're not aware of that until the start of Crows in the Garden. And then that's sort of the discovery of exactly why Connor is so withdrawn and why Abigail feels she has to write everything down. Meanwhile, throughout this, we have the character Mike making appearances and sort of throwing a spanner in the works until in Crows in the Garden, we find that Connor's accidentally killed Mike and had to bury him in the garden. This is never actually mentioned or visibly seen, but it's sort of touched upon throughout conversations throughout, which will obviously happen in Secrets of Mind, which will then be discovered by Joe in Crows in the Garden. The time plan, which is also copied there in front of you, is I've given myself these 4 segments. Now, I've given myself a very long time for script and pre-production, which is just to sort of suss it out and make sure everything is 100% correct before I come back and I can actually do anything after the half term. That's a bit out of character, but still. And then the bookend, I will be shooting over 2 days, where I've booked the theatre out prior to this, and that will be done by the 18th of April. The filming the main sequence can take place on the month between 19th of April and the 12th to the 25th of May. And then the edit process, you'll notice I've only given myself 7 days for, but that's because I'll be editing in situ between all these periods. So hopefully by that point there won't actually be any editing to do, so it'll probably be done by the 14th of May. The resources are very simple and very narrowed down. C4, as I know, don't provide equipment, so I'm providing it myself. It's just an SD card accessible camera with 1080p 16:9, which is your standard. And then an extendable boom microphone using Final Cut Express with a mix of Adobe After Effects and that kind of software. And a Wally Dolly track will be involved for some of the more complex shots, especially in the bookend. See, this, I know I've included this because I know E4 don't typically do these kind of dramas, although in recent years you've sort of been slipping more into the role with shows like Misfits and things like that. Especially in this slot, I think it's a real open opportunity for you to invest in something that's new, which you have been doing for decades now, so it is which is very important that you sort of expand into other areas. And as you can see here, when I did my market research, I found that the interest spread in genres in general on E4 shows was just leaning slightly towards the sitcom side of things. But when I gave the people the option between a generic sitcom and my drama, they were literally 50-50 split, which sort of pushed it just that little 2 people over into the thing. So I'm showing that there really is a chance here for a marketable idea.
Ready to start?
Yeah.
Oh,
Right, obviously you're going for a very certain mood with your drama. What type of special effects are you thinking of putting in there?
well, just sort of simple camera work basically, but rather than actually physically putting visual effects in, I'm going to focus more on the reality of it and the naturalism. So it'll all be like overlaid shots, can be quite effective in the editing process, just sort of overlaying a frame or half a frame, cropping frames to only half so then a person can literally walk away, rather than investing in anything sort of computer generated. I think it'd be better and more influential on the theme that I'm trying to go for if it was very real to the audience.
Yeah, it's quite an intriguing plot and very different from what we normally do. Strikes me as people could get turned off if it's all questions and no answers. So how are you going to put sort of answer, because obviously the whole thing's based around they don't know what's happening, they don't know why people are doing things they're doing.
Yeah, no, there are answers, if that didn't come off very clear. The answers often conflict with each other, but never in a sense. So it's done so that different people can come up with their own conclusion to it, with them all feeling right and none of them feeling cheated with nothing. So you would watch it and get one idea from it and be perfectly content with that idea. So my aim was to, and Dean could get something different, so my aim was to sort of create something that would get people talking and sort of build up this cult situation, which did happen with the show Twin Peaks, which there's never really an answer. There are a lot of questions, but there are many theories about it, and people are still talking about that, and it's been off the air for over 12, 13 years now.
Yeah. Right.
Just to confirm there's going to be no violence or anything.
Oh god.
Yeah, it's all psychological. We don't condone violence before.
Well,
particularly
considering the fact that you've just been taken to court with Ofcom for screening X-Men Origins before the Watershed.
Here's her ideas.
Yeah, I figured. E4 are always more lenient with things, which is why I included the rules and regulations on drugs in there. That came from the E4 sort of interpretation of it. And when it compares to the BBC, they're obviously a lot more lenient, but violence is something I'm definitely steering away from, because violence is a complete answer, and I'm trying to stay away from the complete answers. So.
At the end of each episode, how would you make sure that people want to watch the next one?
Well, apart from the fact that I hope they'd want to, based on the show itself, but I want to leave sort of everything on a cliffhanger. Like, maybe not a cliffhanger that's relevant to the overall series, but a cliffhanger that's relevant to within the episode itself. There are aspects of things within it where time is something that isn't mentioned, the idea of time. It's an incomprehensible fact to them. So these kind of little things that will all happen toward the end, you really need to build that third act. So ending it on just a one line, on something that's ambiguous, something that's quite intriguing, is something that I'm really going to have to work towards, and something that I'm really going for. But including a next time segment on it, like next time on Weave, then that would be something that hopefully draw it in.
Just a quick question, what's the relevance of the name Weave?
The relevance of the name Weave came to me in A Night Terror, which is no joke, and it sort of stuck with me while I was thinking of a name, because I read a quote from someone, I can't remember what it is, that says, we could tangle spiders in the webs that we weave in our lives. And that's something that I like, with this intertwining, weaving plot of all these different characters, perhaps not making sense to everyone all the time, but making sense to someone in their own right, sort of I like that idea.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Okay.